Well, with Oklahoma prisons at 99% capacity, the state depends upon private prisons to hold the rest. Currently, roughly 1 in 5 Oklahoma inmates is housed in a private for-profit facility at a cost to the state of about $73 million annually. And while these private facilities have kept the state from building new prisons, some civil rights groups warn such a move could take us down a path of more incarcerated Oklahomans and more money being laid out by the state to house them. Earlier, I spoke with Ryan Kiesel, the head of the Oklahoma chapter of the ACLU, and Kate Richey with the Oklahoma Policy Institute. Do either one of you have a concern over what seems to be an increased interest in the privatization of prisons here in Oklahoma?
Absolutely. And when we talk about the over-criminalizing of our state that has led to this mass incarceration crisis, and don't get me wrong, this is a crisis. We're at over 99% capacity. Our ability as a state, both with regard to the folks that we're incarcerating and then the effects that we realize when those people leave incarceration, will cripple our state's budget in the not too distant future. It is already to the extent where the state's budget is struggling to keep up. If we move even further to a private prison model, right now around 26% of the state's inmates are in private prisons, there's this thought that we save money. And that's just not the case. Most per diem rates, the state is actually cheaper than private prisons. There are a couple of per diem, when I say per diem, the cost that it costs to incarcerate a single inmate. Yeah. There are a couple of per diem measures where private prisons do appear to be some cost savings to the state. So private prison advocates often point to that and say, look, we can do this cheaper. But what they don't tell you is that in those contracts, there are caps on the maximum amount of medical care that they'll provide, so that whenever an inmate gets sick and they go above that medical cap, the state picks up the bill. There are certain medical treatments that private prisons don't want to be in the business of. HIV and AIDS treatment, chemo treatment, diabetes treatment. These chronic conditions, they don't want to be involved in that. They're too expensive. Those costs are still borne by the state. And then there's the bigger issue, the political issue of when we have a for-profit prison model where there are corporations that are benefiting, their bottom lines benefit whenever we lock up Oklahomans. That makes it very unlikely that we're going to see the kind of political courage and political will at the state capitol to reform our criminal justice system such that we're not locking up all these folks to begin with.
We have prisons for public safety reasons. If someone is truly a threat to the people around them and or they need to pay a debt to society, that's society's responsibility. It's not something anyone should be profiting from. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's not cheaper. It is not cheaper. They do not incorporate, or they do not include all of the costs of operating in prison in these rates that they quote to state leaders per diem when they try and get contracts. And thirdly, we see from other states, we have an excellent record of the performance of these private prison companies who have perpetuated just things that would shock the conscience, human rights violations to inmates that if you're in jail for 2 or 3 years for committing a minor crime, you do not deserve to be treated the way that, or be kept in the conditions that many of these private prisons keep inmates under, and which is the reason that several states and jurisdictions have run them out of town, and the reason they're coming to Oklahoma, because they're looking for new business.
I think that in the long run, both from the amount of money that it would ultimately end up costing the state, and in the cost of the poor outcomes. The recidivism rates that come out of private prisons, the violence of inmate on inmate or inmate on staff, those numbers are abysmal when compared to state corrections facilities. I mean, let's keep in mind the folks that work, the state employees that work in state prisons are public servants. They are, and I don't mean to disparage the people, the officers that work at private prisons, but when you work at a state facility, you're a public servant. You're a servant of the people of Oklahoma. You don't answer to anyone but the people of Oklahoma. These folks that work for private prisons, they answer to a board. They answer to a bottom line, a corporate bottom line. And I think that is one of the big reasons when we see the disparities between the types of outcomes of private prisons versus state-run facilities.